man wearing a red turban, cold around his eyes, beard.
Gordon speak. I can't remember who was I forget which one was naughty. I think it was Gordon. Gordon was very, one of them ran away. I think it was.
So I'm Emily Lunn and I'm the Heritage Project Manager for Environment Trust. We're here today at the splendidly eccentric mausoleum of Sir Richard Burton and his equally daring wife, Lady Isabel Burton. Sir Richard Burton was an explorer, author, translator and diplomat, and is perhaps most well remembered for his expedition to find the source of the River Nile and for translating texts such as 1001 Arabian Nights and the Kama Sutra. The Trust is raising funds to carry out essential repair work to the mausoleum for Burton's bicentenary in March 2021. We're also running a project that's designed to encourage everyone to get out and explore. We're here today with the explorer, author and photographer Levison. Your journeys have taken you across the Himalayas, you've walked the length of the Nile, you've walked through the Caucasus Mountains, and you've also more recently journeyed around the Arabian Peninsula and through much of the Middle East. So thank you ever so much for joining us today.
No, thank you very much. It's a real privilege and an honour to be here, particularly in the shadow of this incredible mausoleum. Richard Burton was one of my absolute heroes, and I feel very proud to be a part of this campaign.
When did you first come across Burton and some of his exploits?
I think Burton's been a part of my life and inspiration for a very long time. I think I first encountered Burton. I remember watching the movie Mountains of the Moon when I was a kid, and I was inspired. At university I studied history and was fascinated by that particular period of exploration, and I studied the Victorian explorers. But Burton stood out for me as being not only one of the most fearless and brave of the explorers, but also a real intellectual, a real thinker. This is a man who is reputed to speak dozens of languages, some say up to 27, which is quite amazing. As you said, he translated a number of very important texts throughout his life. He was a soldier, a political officer, some say a spy, and his adventures have really inspired me. And a lot of the places that I've travelled to over the last decade or so, in Central Asia, in Africa, on the Nile, and parts of Arabia, I've always encountered Richard's adventures wherever I've been. So it's been great to have him as a sort of a bit of a guiding light throughout, and so he's a man who I greatly admire, and so I think his legacy deserves to be remembered.
You cite Burton as a hero. You reference him in a number of your books, and you in fact name a camel after him in your expedition along the River Nile. How much of an inspiration has Burton been on your travels?
Yeah, I mean, his exploits and his adventures have really guided me along the way, and whether it's been in the deserts of Arabia or places like Sudan, Somalia, and Central Africa, he's very much been a part of my own adventures, and what I try to do is reference his journeys in mine, and I think that's a really good way of hopefully showing more people about his adventures, and the more people that learn about Richard Burton, the better, I think, because he was not only a real character, but somebody that we can be rightly proud of, I think. And so yes, I thought it'd be only right to name one of my camels after him on my Nile expedition. One of the others was John Hanning Speke, of course, who was a bit of a rival, particularly in the search for the source of the Nile. And it was a bit of a light-hearted, tongue-in-cheek jest, but Burton was by far and away my most trustworthy camel, that's for sure.
That's really good to hear. Are there any of Burton's expeditions that you're particularly envious of, or that you would look to replicate perhaps in the future?
I mean, all of Richard Burton's journeys were magnificent in their own way. Of course, from my perspective, I wish I could have joined him on his search for the source of the Nile. In many ways, my journey up the Nile was following his footsteps, albeit very humbly. But yeah, I think his exploits in Somaliland and Somalia in particular were fascinating. This was a part of the world that very few Europeans had dared to venture, and it was incredibly risky, some of the things he got up to, and he paid the price for that. He got into lots of scrapes, not least getting a spear through the face, which he somehow managed to escape from with the spear still in place. And it goes to show what a really robust individual he was. He was a really hard man, and it's amazing that he lived for so long, really.
So, thinking about your expedition along the River Nile, you not only followed in the footsteps of Burton, but also some of the greats like Livingstone and Speke. You became the first person to walk the length of the Nile, approximately 4,000 miles. You managed something that had defeated people like Ptolemy and Alexander the Great. How did it feel when you were at the source of the River Nile, about to embark on that journey?
I mean, it was a terrifying prospect. I remember being on the Congolese-Rwanda border, and I purposely chose the furthest tributary of the source of the Nile just because I wanted to make sure I covered all bases. And thinking, wow, Egypt feels a very long way away, and of course it was. It was, so, like I say, over 4,000 miles away, and I had no idea really how long it was going to take. It was a bit of a risk in many ways, but it was a lifelong ambition and a real dream of mine to embark on a journey that nobody had done and lots of people thought was impossible. But there was something very appealing about that as well, and for me it was a real adventure, and the not knowing was part of it. So I look back and I feel it was a really rewarding journey, and hopefully other people will take inspiration from that.
You encountered difficulties in South Sudan and decided to leave South Sudan and take a flight and get as close as you possibly could back to the area that you'd back to the river that you'd sadly had to leave. Would you be keen to ever go back to South Sudan and walk that particular stretch of the Nile?
Yeah, that's on my list. There's a stretch of I think it was about 350 or 400 miles between Bor on the front line of what was then happening with the civil war and Malakal on the Sudan border. And so yeah, one day I'll get back and I'll go and finish that stage for sure.
What has been the most physically demanding expedition of yours?
I think the Nile was probably, because it was the longest and my first, I suppose the first expedition where I'd set off with no real understanding of how long it was going to take. I think physically that was the most demanding, but actually beyond that, going on to walk the Himalayas, there was a lot more hills there, so that also took its toll. But all of my journeys have had some physical elements, often for many months on end. The Nile took 9 months of walking, but for me it's not necessarily the physical feat or the endurance that appeals to me. It's the people that you meet along the way and the cultures that you encounter.
What's it like embarking on an expedition where you have so many unknowns? How much preparation do you have to do ahead of time?
Well, the Nile journey took me probably 2 years of preparation. The vast majority of that, of course, like anything, is trying to find the funding and looking into researching the permits and all the bureaucracy and paperwork that comes with an expedition of that scale. Things have gradually got easier as I progressed, but even my journey around the Arabian Peninsula, which I did a couple of years ago, that was a good 6 months of planning before even setting off. But you have to be aware that it will not go to plan, and no plan will probably survive the first few weeks. So what I found is that you have to really incorporate an element of contingency in all plans and expect the unexpected.
And thinking about your journey then around the Middle East, that's an area that's been explored for thousands of years. You've got Ibn Fadlan, Ibn Battuta, Marco Polo crossed along that area. What is it that you think draws explorers through the generations into and across the Middle East?
I think for me the Middle East, the Arabian Peninsula is a very enigmatic part of the world, particularly for a Western perspective. There's something very alien about the environment, the desert. But for me, it's a very pure environment. There's something very alluring about looking out across what we think of the sea of sand. But of course, it's not. There are many people that live lives in the desert, and the Bedouin are fascinating and incredibly hospitable people that I really enjoy spending time with and learning more about their culture. And it's a very diverse region. And for me, going to these ancient cities, places like Damascus or Jericho, Jerusalem, and some of the oldest cities in the world, in fact, in the Mesopotamian marshes in Iraq, places like Eridu and Ur, where you can be walking out across the desert and you'll find these cuneiform tablets just strewn across deserts, and it's like being in an open air museum. And for me as a historian, that was an amazing privilege and an opportunity. And I think it's important to tell that story to people that wouldn't otherwise know about it, and also give a voice to the local people there who often are misrepresented, or when we think about the Middle East, particularly from the last 15 years, we associate it with conflict and terrorism and war, and sadly, that's often what comes to people's minds. Whereas I hope that my journeys have done something, at least, to try and look beyond the stereotypes and smash a few myths and encourage people to look beyond the headlines and hear the people's stories of the local people that live there and just want to get on with their daily lives.
Is it the meeting of people and the ability to tell their story to a new audience that motivates you, or is it the culture and the history side of things? What keeps you going?
I think my motivation and drive is a combination of factors, but I think what really keeps me going when I'm in a difficult environment or struggling or thinking, wow, I've still got 6 months of walking to do, it's actually meeting fascinating people that really drives me. And it's often the sense of hospitality. And I'll never forget walking through Sudan, at the start of the Sahara Desert, knowing that I'd got months of desert ahead of me and feeling quite daunted by that. I was very humbled where everywhere I went, the local people, the Nubians, would come out of their houses and offer me tea and food and water, never wanting anything in return. And it actually got to the point where my expedition was being slowed down, and the Bedouin camel drivers that came with me insisted on not walking near the villages because we were going too slowly because of the hospitality. And they insisted that we avoid the villages and camp out in the desert, which I thought was a bit ungrateful, but I had to come to a compromise. So we'd do sort of a day through the villages and a day in the desert. But whenever we'd camp in the desert, the local people, they could see us making a campfire sort of half a mile away. They'd always insist on coming out and ask us why we wouldn't accept their hospitality. And I'll never forget, one guy was so annoyed that we wouldn't, or sort of affronted by the fact we wouldn't go into his village. He stormed off and came back sort of half an hour later with his bed on his head and carried it and said, listen, if you're not coming into my home is coming to you. And it's amazing that real sense of generosity that lives with me forever.
That's fantastic. I mean, are those sort of experiences, or are there experiences you've had like that where you've taken them back home and you've incorporated them into your own life?
I have, actually. When I was 21, 22, I just graduated from university, and I was thinking about joining the army, and I decided to go sort of travelling and do my own bit of a grand tour, and I hitchhiked to India from Nottingham, and I travelled through places like Afghanistan and Iran and Pakistan, and what I'd noticed is that throughout the different cultures that you meet on the way, whether that's in Eastern Europe, Russia, the Caucasus Mountains, or the deserts of Iran, or indeed in India, the sense of the code of hospitality is so deeply ingrained, particularly in the more remote communities. And I'll never forget staying in a Sikh Gurdwara across India, and indeed in the Golden Temple in Amritsar. and you're allowed to stay there for free for 3 days and 3 nights and eat there. And I thought it's a really, really nice way of thinking about things. So when I came home, and I have a few weeks here and there in between joining the army or in between travels where I didn't have anywhere to live because I was sort of a bit of a nomad, I always kept that with me, that I would never impinge on anyone's hospitality for more than 3 days. Even if people said, oh, you can stay at mine for a week, I always had 3 days and move on. And in that way, I never annoyed my friends too much.
And they'll accept you back.
Exactly. And because I was hitchhiking, I always pick up hitchhikers. So if I'm driving, I always pick up hitchikers and pass that on. So that's something that stayed with me. And yeah, I think just extending that friendship to strangers, and and it served me well.
Inside Burton's mausoleum, he has camel bells and the Hand of Fatima and some lamps that he picked up through his travels in Syria and the wider Middle East. What are some of the best souvenirs you've got?
Oh wow! Well, I've picked up everything from Persian rugs to a sword from Sudan. I've got a few trinkets here. Actually, this is an Arabian khanjar or dagger, and this is all silver. And I picked this up in the Horn of Africa in Somalia, actually, and it's worn traditionally by the Yemeni people, but there's a lot of trade across the Gulf of Aden. So this dates back to the late 19th century. So who knows? Maybe this is something that Burton himself picked up along the way.
Yeah, I can see him with one of those.
This is something that I find particularly amazing. I was given this by a lady in the jungle in the middle of Panama in the Darien Gap, and she said, "Would you like to take this away?" I said, "What is it?" And I was sort of holding out. I had a rough idea of what it was, but she said it was a lightning bolt. I said, "A lightning bolt?" She said, "Yes. When the lightning strikes a tree and it falls over, we always find these things." And I said, "Well," and I knew that this is a petrified or fossilized Megalodon tooth. It's a prehistoric shark from 30 million years ago. You can feel just how sharp it is. But this would have been a shark that was about 30 meters long. But trying to explain the concept of a prehistoric dinosaur shark to a lady that had never seen the sea, let alone know what a shark was, she was convinced that this was the hand of God itself, a lightning bolt.
That's incredible.
Quite remarkable, isn't it? But that's something I really enjoy.
That's something to treasure.
And I've got a couple of books here that I've picked up along the way. This is Burton's Mecca Medina from 1874, and this is actually a first edition of his book First Footsteps in East Africa. So it's a beautiful book, which goes to show his amazing legacy.
Yeah, incredibly special. Thank you so much for bringing those along. Why do you support the restoration of the mausoleum?
Well, I think it's really important to ensure that Sir Richard Burton's legacy continues, and more people can know about his work and his life. And this very eccentric mausoleum that was erected, by his wife and his friends, is testament to what a character he really was. And it's seen better days, and it definitely needs a bit of work done to it. So hopefully, when people find out about this campaign, people can chip in and support and help get this back to its former glory.
Have you discovered anything new on your own doorstep, particularly in lockdown?
Well, it's given me a great opportunity to do some nice walks along the River Thames, actually, and it's actually a good reminder that you don't need to travel to the ends of the earth to find beautiful places. And living in southwest London myself, it's been great to spend more time in London and explore the sort of hidden gems, like this place that are there that we often overlook.
Yeah. We received some questions from members of the public to put to you. So starting with Leela Hickton, who is age 9, she wants to know if you saw any snow leopards in the Himalayas.
Ooh, I didn't see any snow leopards myself, but I did see their tracks, and I saw some of their poo. I actually named. Well, I mean, I on my final leg of my Himalayas journey in Bhutan. Bhutan is filled with hundreds, if not thousands, of unclimbed mountains, and I wanted to climb an unclimbed peak to finish my journey, and that's where I found the leopard track. So I called it Snow Leopard Mountain.
Oh, fantastic!
But I've yet to see one myself in the wild.
Is that mountain labelled as such on a map?
No, it's not. No, but it's in my memory and in my book it is.
Leela's sister Gabby, who's 10, asked what's the most exciting, interesting animal you've seen?
I love elephants. I've just done a journey walking across Botswana with a herd of elephants, which was amazing to learn more about the way they live and how they travel and things like that. And they're a very intelligent, very sociable, interesting species. And I'd encourage everybody to find out more about elephants because they're very endangered and we need to do what we can to protect them.
Rex is 7 and would like to become an explorer. Do you have any tips for him?
Well, Rex, I think when you're a bit older, that you can absolutely be an explorer. You just need to do well at school, do your homework, read lots of books about exploration and travel, and then when you get the opportunity, follow that curiosity and go and see the world.
Lucia Pekarova wants to know, what do you always pack and what do you do to prepare?
Well, it really depends on the expedition, where I'm going, the kind of environment, because obviously what you need in the desert is very different to what you might need in the jungle. Mm-hmm. So I try and pack as light as possible. My rule of thumb is if you don't use something every day, then it doesn't go in the bag, and I just carry a little day sack and then off you go. In terms of the preparation, physically, if I'm doing a very long walk for months on end, I don't really see much point in walking for many months beforehand. So I just take it steady on the first few weeks.
So Sophie Norden asks, what do you think the role of explorers and exploration is in today's society?
Well, gone are the days of pith helmets and planting flags in the map anymore. But I think exploration is really about documenting a moment in time, documenting what's happening now, so that not just for the sake of posterity, but so that we can affect change for the positive, and making sure that word gets out about really important issues, whether that's climate change or poverty or whatever it might be. So I think the explorer's duty is to share information about parts of the world that we don't often hear about, or that get neglected by the media, or get the wrong representation by the news, and show what's really happening.
Final question, as someone who's always on the move, how have you managed through lockdown?
Well, lockdown's been a very interesting time. This is probably the longest amount of time I've been in one place in my entire adult life. So it's been a nice time to actually just reflect on things and to take stock of what I've got. And it's been nice to spend time at home and be more in contact with my family and friends, and just enjoy England. It's been a beautiful summer, and
yeah, it has been.
It's been lovely to just be grateful for what I've got, and hopefully, despite the obvious tragedy of the times, hopefully some people have got something out of it and taken a bit of time for reflection, and hopefully enjoy the beautiful British countryside as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Get out and about and explore. We very much hope that you enjoyed listening to this conversation and will consider donating to the project. Funds will allow us to carry out essential repairs to the building, which will see it brought back to life to its original condition for Burton's 200th anniversary. The funds raised will help us bring Burton to a new audience, and we hope that the mausoleum will inspire the next generation of explorers to go out and see the world, much like Burton and Levison would.